So today our topic is kindness. So the reason I picked this topic is it played a really important role in my healing a few years back when everything fell flat and life gave me one of my biggest curveballs. And the act of consciously being kind really helped and to grow and to move on onto the amazing life that I lead today. So I don't really want this to be all about what a kind person Alex is. I'm a firm believer that all human beings are born kind. I think that with a massive capacity and then on how we are socialized and the card that we are dealt, things might change. We get wounded, we become fearful, we feel defensive to protect ourselves. And when we do that, sometimes we lose that ability at times to be other-centered, and we start being a bit more selfish and looking after our own interests ahead of others. But I do believe that born with a massive capacity for love and kindness. That in a way we work, we are all kind and unkind, and depending on the degree of our wounds, we lean more one way or the other way, but we all have both in us. So even the kindest of us have times when we act selfishly and vice versa. I'm not really looking today, though, to talk about what it means, what the difference is between kindness and selfishness. I think we all know what they are. When I use the word consciously, it's about being kind with no expectation of something in return. And what a massive value that is to us, and how it can really change our lives, and how when we are able to do things absolutely with no need to want something in return. I think I've been generally in my life a pretty kind person. I tend to be very generous. I have quite a high level of empathy, and as I've and had a better understanding of myself and of other people, I have become very intuitive of people. I've also been in how I've been raised. I have a very healthy family. My parents are still, we were raised very traditionally. I'm very lucky to still have both. I have a relationship with my son, even though we're continents away from each other. We speak regularly all the time. Our family wasn't very well off. It was good enough for me to go to very good schools. We didn't move very often, so I managed to go to only one primary school and one high school. And there was even enough that both my sister and I were able to go to university. After school, I had a fantastic career. I got married. I had everything that everybody could want. I certainly was the epitome of what people may consider success. But when you have all that, it's really easy to be kind. It's really easy to be generous. Life was not hard for me. So the thing is can you be kind even when things don't go well? And as I said earlier, can we do it without something in return? Anyway, so in 2013, when a very dear friend of mine recommended two different things to me. One of them was I started going to Art of Living. And when I did the course the first time, And I would highly recommend that course. Let me actually put that up on the screen for everybody. Here we go. When I did that course the first time, one of the exercises that we were given to do one day was we were told we had to go and do 2 acts of kindness before the following day's class. Didn't mind what it was, but we had to make sure that we did at least 2 acts of kindness or generosity towards another person. I think it was the first time I had consciously planned to do something kind for another person. It wasn't that in the moment it was decided or somebody asked me for a favor or something like that. But I had to think about it and go, okay, in the next 24 hours, somewhere I need to find 2 opportunities to add value to other people's lives. And it was an extremely rewarding experience. And then the other thing that this friend of mine recommended to me was a book called 29 Gifts by an author called Cami Walker. So brilliant book and a very easy and short read. Ideally, you should maybe read it over 29 days, but you can read it in a couple of days. It's not a long read. And basically, Cami Walker goes through how she overcame some very severe health issues through acts of kindness for others. So by taking away the focus on herself and her own issues and focusing it on other people, she actually landed up healing herself. An extremely powerful book. But through those 2 experiences, I really started realizing how consciously thinking about acts of kindness, how that can change one's life. So for me, up until that point, while I was usually kind to people all the time, I can't really say that there wasn't maybe an ulterior motive often to my kindness. And I think that while we are kind, sometimes we are kind because it keeps the peace, or we can avoid conflict, or because the relationship is important to us and we can leverage it later on, or being kind earns us recognition. Being kind and generous could earn us love. And these are all things that we naturally do sometimes when we need something. And I guess this also goes back to even the healthiest of us do carry some degree of wounds. And even in our kindness, we use this as a way to plaster or bandage. And so this thinking about doing things, knowing that the person that I'm helping can do absolutely nothing back for me. And even if they could, not doing that with that motive in mind really changed how I saw life, and it really impacted me. So for that. So let's talk a little bit about how did I actually take this and incorporate it in my life, and the benefits that I got out of doing this. Okay, so I see we have a comment here. It says we have to know selfishness to know kindness within ourselves. Yes, thank you, Simon. I appreciate that. And that's and in fact, most things in life are paradoxes. And you have to know the one side in order to appreciate the other. So like in this example where to know kindness and have experienced selfishness, where that to understand indifference, if you to understand laughter and joy and anger and sadness, and yeah, you do need to understand the one extreme in order to appreciate the other and live the other. Thank you, Simon. That was valuable. So a little bit of the benefit kind. So the first thing is, it really gives you an opportunity to see the contrast between yourself and another person. Usually someone, it will be called they are in need. And in that moment, you have more. It might be you may have capacity, have more money, you may have more time, whatever it is. But in that moment, you have something more than the person that, and that acknowledging of standing that right now something that this person really helps us to see that our life is not as bad as we think it could be, because someone right now who has, and particularly since we live in a society where there's such a massive focus on the negative, and we are constantly bombarded with news, horrible catastrophes and war and conflict that's happening all over the world, the political situation, the economy, etc. It's all constantly painted in these negative lights. Even when we speak to people, people moan all the time. People are talking about their problems and their challenges all the time. That it's very easy that we get caught up in that, and we ourselves start seeing life in a very negative light and not appreciating all the amazing positive things that happen. And when we start focusing on wanting to be kind towards others and are consciously looking for opportunities to be kind, we are also constantly faced with times where we realize that we have something that somebody else doesn't. Life is actually pretty good because of that. The thing that comes out of this is that by contrasting, it gives us the tools with which to practice gratitude. It's much easier to be grateful for what we are and to acknowledge the wonderful life that we live when we've seen what could be if we didn't have all the things that we had. So in a way, while we don't want to be kind with the objective of getting something in return, we do get some amazing gifts in return. And the capacity to be grateful is one of the most important gifts that we can be giving to ourselves. And it really helps us to see life for the beautiful life that it is. And if you really think about it, we live in the most incredible times. We are getting to do and see things that no other people in the history of the human race ever got to do. Right now, I am speaking from my room in my home to anybody in the world who wants to listen. Couldn't do that any time in the past. We have phones that let us have relationships across continents, and we just live in amazing times. And the world is getting smaller, and we get more opportunity to connect and be with people. And it's a great thing to be able to acknowledge it and understand how fortunate we are. And then with that, when we start living in gratitude, what we start creating is an economy of abundance. We are constantly being force-fed this idea that we live in an economy of scarcity. And this scarcity creates a tremendous amount of fear with people. And with that fear is where this behavior towards selfishness comes. But when we start realizing that we actually do live in a world that has abundance, and that there is enough for everybody, and everything that we need is there. Not always everything we want, and there's a difference, but everything that we need is there. Then we can start really living an authentic life. We don't feel a need to want to protect ourselves and defend ourselves, but we can just be open and generous. And that's where connection comes, and an opportunity to really grow through other people and with other people. Right. And then lastly, I just want to add that with this, the benefit also of being kind is because it is naturally in our nature, it is the way we were born, and we are actually going back to what we were meant to be. It just sits well with us, sort of energetically. It sits well with us. And we feel just better. We can look at ourselves in the mirror better. We have a better sense of ourselves and our purpose and our place in the world when we have when we are kind and other focused. We also connect better with our community and understand how we are part of that bigger community and that we are not isolated beings. And this is the other thing that, if we go back to the point of scarcity, is we live in a world which is so consumer driven, and that consumerism drives this fear of scarcity. And sure, now I've just lost what I wanted to say with that. So it drives this fear of scarcity. But with this also brings this need for every one of us to want to be independent all the time. We feel this need to be completely self-sufficient. But in that also comes this disconnection with the rest of our community. Whereas when we are living in a world of abundance, where there's kindness and generosity, we then feel a greater deal of trust to rely on the community. And that brings about connection, and it brings about love and closeness, and we get to be able to operate the way a human being is supposed to operate. And then we can be truly, authentically ourselves. So before we go on to the how and how to be consciously kind, let me just go back a few to the comments and just read. I see that we have quite a few that have come through. Gareth joined us. Hello, Gareth. Welcome. He mentioned that it's crazy. I'm not sure where that came from. Okay, Simon did say, he said, I stopped reading or watching the news and TV 3 years ago. The best thing. Yes, I completely agree. Actually, about just around 2000, year 2000, so that's like 17 years ago, I gave my TV away. And it's not that I don't like watching TV shows. I might on occasion do that still. I either get it from someone or wherever it is. But the best thing about staying away from TV is you don't watch the news and you don't watch advertising. And those are the two big things that have a terrible impact on our psyche. Okay, Simon then added, the chances of both of us being right here, right now, engaging each other is so small and thus so precious. Absolutely, thank you. Yes, and that is something to be hugely grateful for. Simon added, how we experience ourselves is how we experience the world. Be kind. Yes. And then Gareth added that he loves this topic. Thank you so much, Gareth. Cool. Okay, so how to be kind. So the first thing is start small. It doesn't have to be anything big or major. It can, and also it doesn't have to be anything huge. So that day in Art of Living, when they asked us to each do something small or to do something kind for at least 2 other people, the first thing I did was I had a colleague which I knew was had mentioned to me that she was looking for books. She was about to go on maternity leave and she needed to be entertained for her 4 months. She obviously didn't yet realize that her kid would keep her very busy, but it was her first kid. So she was very worried about being bored during her maternity leave, and she was trying to collect books. I am a huge reader, and I had a whole bunch of books that were just sitting in the attic, and I hadn't considered giving it to her at all up until that moment, even though they were just sitting there collecting dust, and they were also the type of books that I was never going to reread. And when I was thinking about what could I do for something, I was like, well, they're just sitting there. They should go to her. I mean, there's no reason for me to be keeping it. So I packed the books and I gave them to her. So that was something that was super easy. It didn't cost me anything, and it was really, really, really simple thing to do. And then the other thing I did was I gave food to a homeless person, and basically I bought some apples, I bought some juice, I gave them some apples and juice. I then, from then on, in realizing how simple and easy it was to do that, I suddenly kept apples in my car permanently. I always had apples in my car because it was just so easy to hand them out to someone who was hungry. And also for me, I was giving them something healthy, certainly healthier than giving them a pie or something like that. And at least they got something in their tummy, and it was really, really easy to do. And it didn't cost me much to do that at all. I mean, how much is an apple? So starting with something really small is already adding huge value. An apple cost me very little, but it meant that somebody wasn't starving. So that one apple to that person was really meaningful. The next thing after starting small is that our time is often worth more than our money. So it doesn't have to be a material thing that you're giving someone. You can also give them of your time. Sometimes all people need is a little bit of attention. Maybe they, or a little bit of help. It could be, you might see that there's somebody struggling. Maybe the little old lady who lives in your complex needs groceries brought up to her flat. Then you do it. And that's giving a little bit of your time and your energy. It costs you absolutely nothing. And very often that actually adds way more value to people than throwing money at a challenge or being kind through material things. So if you feel that you don't have the financial means to be kind, we all have time. And before you say that you don't have time, every single person has the same 24 hours, and it's how we manage it. And you absolutely can find a few minutes in the day to give those few minutes to somebody else. And if you consider that time is something we don't get back, whereas money we can make back, it definitely is something of much higher value to give to someone than money. But more importantly than time, attention is worth even more than time. So if you are giving someone of your time, what you want to be doing is making sure you actually engage with that person. So to give an example, I'll go back to the apple example. If I'm driving past someone and I decide to give them the apple, I have two ways to do it. I can open the window and just give them the apple and put it in their hand, or I could open the window, look at them, ask them, how are they doing? How is their day? What is their name? Give them my name and say, here's an apple. I hope that helps you. Because that engagement, that acknowledgement that they are worthy people is in itself a beautiful gift. So, and that costs us nothing. Even if you don't have an apple in the car with you to give someone, you can still roll down the window and say, hey, how are you doing? And just have a little conversation. How much conversation does someone on the street get to have every day? The next thing that you want to do is you want to have the practice every day of reflecting on what you did, because this helps to keep it as a conscious thing that we do, not something that we just do randomly when the opportunity arises. But if you are deciding that I want to consciously do at least one act of kindness to someone with no expectation of something in return, then spend every evening to reflect on it and go, well, what did I do today? And then when you're reflecting on it, you want to ask yourself a few questions. You want to ask yourself, firstly, what did I do? What was the result? How did it impact the person? How did it add value? And then ask yourself, how did that make me feel to do that? And I'm pretty certain that every single time you're going to come out feeling great, like you did something really meaningful. And it's good to reflect on that, and it helps you then also to keep it consciously always in the forefront of your mind that you are doing it daily. And then the next thing is, while we might want to start small, one of the default things that will happen is that over time the acts of kindness start to grow. So having apples in my car, the first time I did it, it was a conscious thing to do. But over time it becomes a habit, so it no longer becomes a conscious thing to do. So, which means I need to up my game. So then I need to start thinking of better ways to be consciously kind. And as each time that you find ways to be kind to people, it becomes part of your habit every day. So you find more creative ways to be kind to people. And it just makes you a more rewarded and fulfilled person. And then if you believe that kindness begets more kindness, it means that the people you touch will go on to be more kind to others. And so we can be just spreading more and more love and joy. So Simon said, it's so important to be kind to ourselves too. Absolutely, yes. And a few weeks ago, my broadcast was around self-love and how critically important it is that we are kind and loving to ourselves. And the reality is that it's really difficult to be kind to other people if we are not also looking after ourselves. We need to be fueling ourselves emotionally and spiritually all the time in order to have the capacity to have the love and kindness to show to others. So yes, it's really important that we are also kind to ourselves. And just like everybody else, we are human beings too. And we also need sometimes to receive love. And sometimes we are the only ones to give ourselves love. And we should start with ourselves. Simon added, giving apples also helps you accept instead of giving giving apples also helps you accept instead of getting annoyed by being. It helps you to embrace things. Yes, I agree. In fact, that was one of the things that I got out of it. It's certainly very easy to be at a street light and feel annoyed by people asking for things. And I think sometimes that annoyance comes out of a sense of guilt because in that moment we are not in a position or prepared to be able to help. But when you are prepared, and this is where the consciousness comes from because you have planned for it, then it becomes really easy that when they are there to have something immediately to give them. So yes, brilliant. Thank you, Simon. And I think there was one more comment. There's a few more. Then Simon said, so glad you mentioned giving my time. You've just confirmed something I've been deciding on. I'm glad that that confirms something for you. And then Simon added, oh yes, you just reminded me of something I've been wanting to do, something kind. Brilliant. I'm glad to hear that. I do have 2 questions that were sent to me in the week, and we'll just go through that. One of them was, I firmly believe that kindness or charity starts at home. I would rather invest my time and my love than a stranger. Okay, so we've all often heard the saying, charity starts at home, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with putting your time and money with the ones you love. Absolutely. And I'm not discounting any of that at all in today's conversation. What I'm saying is that we do need to put time aside as well for things that have no ulterior motive. And the reality is when we choose to put all our kindness only with those we love, there is an ulterior motive to that. because it has an impact on our own lives. It has, whereas if it's for someone who has nothing, no meaning to us, can't contribute back to us, it serves the greater good. It serves the world at large. And I think that this helps us to see ourselves as part of the larger community, as opposed to the very narrow view that we are just and family and just the people that we immediately impact and love. So having it broaden out to strangers as well helps us to broaden out our community as well. And then the second question is, I'm generally a kind and generous person, but often my kindness is not seen or appreciated. I feel it is hard to continue to be generous to someone who can't say thank you. So what I would say to you is, if it's important for you to be said thank you to, are you really doing it with no expectation of something in return? And I think it's important that we go in not assuming we will be thanked. There's lots of reasons why people might not thank or appreciate what you do. And they are not always ill-intended reasons. Sometimes people just don't have the capacity to see that. Sometimes people are so hurt and wounded that they feel maybe entitled to what you've given them. Or maybe they don't know how to say thank you. But I think that it's important that we don't assume intention when people don't behave the way we expect them to. I also think it's important that as human beings, we don't allow our capacity to be great human beings by being impacted by someone else's behavior. Why should you not be the best human being you can possibly be just because somebody else hasn't behaved quite the way you want them to? Who then has the control over who you are? So I think it's really that we just don't look at things like appreciation and thank yous, etc. You may make a point to always say thank you to another person. It's okay if they don't do that back to you. As long as in the end, your intention was one that was not self-serving, it was purely for that other person, that should be more than enough. And that's really where you will get the most out of kindness in terms of making your being. We've got another viewer who's just joined us. Welcome. I have not before, so welcome you. I think you're a first timer with us. Thank you for joining. Estella made a comment. We are called to heal the world and love our neighbors and the strangers. The golden rule. Yes. So we are part of the whole world, not just the ones we love, but also everybody else in the world. Thank you, Estella. Let's see what else. And then Estella, just in response to the thank you comment, that the God and the universe thanks you, and that should be enough. Absolutely, that should be more than enough. And we can assume that there is gratitude from God and the universe when we behave in a kind way. And we all know that what we give is what we get. And she adds, it's what you do that matters. It feeds you. Okay. Kindness. I'd like you to imagine a world where every single person was kind. Imagine a world where every one of us thought about everybody else. We wouldn't need to think about ourselves at all because somebody else would be watching our back. And imagine what it would feel like to be in a space where you didn't have to watch your own back and worry about yourself because everybody else is worrying about everybody else and looking out for each other. Can you imagine the love, the connection we would feel? Could you imagine how easy it would be for us to be truly ourselves? Well, that world starts with each one of us as individuals. It starts with me, and it starts with you. And if each one of us does that, it will spur somebody else on. And yes, it might seem like pie in the sky, but I certainly think it is a world worth striving for. So I wish you all a wonderful week, and I look forward to all of you going ahead and being kind, consciously kind, to all the wonderful strangers in our world. Thank you for listening to me this evening, and I'll see you all next week. Goodbye.